The sun's coming up, the drinks are hot, and now it's time for our first cup. Today, center stage. You know, I love it when a plan comes together, but I hate it when it comes together like this one. I end first cup with two very particular points. Death comes for us all, and a closed mouth never gets fed. And I know that these ideas are intense, uh, but it's not my intention to abandon you with their weight at the end of every episode. Right? In fact, as soon as I settled on using them, I knew that at some point I should explain why I did so, but only when life afforded me a genuine opportunity to kind of reflect on them and talk about them. And as it turns out, I didn't have to wait long. So last week, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. They told me that their mother-in-law, their wife's mom, had just shared that she had cancer again. And, a million things shot through my head. You know, my dad's cancer diagnosis and death, everything in between. And as my friend told their story, I heard tales similar to my experience, and a few far beyond said same, right? And although at this point in my life, the distance and experience feels like it's got a familiar form, like any capital C change, like cancer, it commands attention without needing an audition, right? It demands the spotlight, and sometimes it demands the director's chair too. And no matter what happens, that seems to be common form, right? I mean, change can be so demanding, like so single-minded, that it commands not only your attention, but even the attention of those close to you. And, sometimes despite everything we believe about how much we control ourselves and our world, we need to be disabused of that fantasy. That's not saying that we're fragile or somehow incapable, right? Um, think of it this way. If our life is a play, right, there's a lot that we have control over, that we can influence to some degree, even to a major degree, right? And I'm all for influencing where we can, right? We can pick the cast, right? The people that are a part of things. We can pick the setting a lot of the time and in a lot of ways. We can pick the themes that we emphasize. We can pick the overall story of our play. We can pick, hell, the wardrobe. We can choose what to put in the spotlight, but we can't control a lot of what impacts our play, especially from the outside, what changes the play, right? And that's okay. In fact, it is imperative to accept. Because make no mistake, capital C change comes for us all. It doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how you vote, it doesn't matter how much money you've got in the bank, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how much of a good person you are. Like, if you're human, you will face change that forces its way onto center stage in your life, right? Your attention will be compelled, if for no other reason, that we as a species tend to seek the exact opposite of change, right? We look for stability, for certainty, for comfort. And when your version of those things are disrupted, right? Whether it's your family or your job or your faith or your education or your experience or your health, you will become focused on the disruptor. And if you can learn this truth without being forced to accept it, uh, you'll be much more prepared to deal with it when it does happen. It's really hot still. It's just good tea, though. Now, talking to my friend, it's clear that there are a lot of questions, and in those situations, like even something as basic as sharing basic information uh, can be a challenge, like, let alone coming to consensus on how to act afterwards, right? And in this particular case, there's a lot of ideas, but other actors can make a play quite complicated. especially if they don't want to share the stage with change. And I want to be clear, I'm saying this without any judgment whatsoever, right? Conflict comes with change. Hell, even in my case, right? While my family pretty much agreed on like 90% of what we did and what we were doing while my dad was going through his dying process, there's still issues that are unresolved 4 years later. But that's also not because anyone involved is inherently like a bad person. It's because those issues had no room when cancer was center stage. And something else that I've come to realize is that it's a lot easier for me to say that, right? To be comfortable with it, because even with cancer being center stage when it was, I spoke up when I saw it was needed, right? For dad or for myself or for the family. I did so more clearly and directly than I had ever done before in my life. You Um, and that reason is because when change is happening, like it's happening, right? And if you want to have any say in what comes next, you cannot afford to stay silent, right? You can't slow down or shut up when you need to step up for yourself or someone else. And this is true even when, especially when there's nothing you can do. There's one last thing that I should mention about everything I've said here. Everything I've said actually applies to all change, not just bad change, not just neutral change, not just good change, all change, right? And I know it's a lot easier for us to think about terminal or other permanent negative changes. Like, we're human, that's how loss aversion works. Like, I get it. But it's important to be prepared for everything, for change of a neutral or a good nature as well, because no matter what's commanding your attention, that is today's play. And something else might be there or not be there tomorrow. And that means that we have to make the most of what we can. We have to do everything that we can with today's story. And in doing so, we must be flexible with our approach and inflexible in our acceptance. Because frankly, we never know what might take center stage. And now you know why. No matter what you've heard or what I've said, you must remember that death comes for us all. A closed mouth never gets fed. Be brave. We'll talk again soon.